Fueled by Fleetway Market.
Fuel up your car and cooler at Fleetway this football season.
Let's go.
All right, good morning. Welcome in the Out of Bounds Show. Brought to you by the John Deere tractors from Ag Up Equipment. Mississippi Ag is now Ag Up Equipment, 17 locations. AgUp.com. John Deere America's Tractor for your family land, farm, or hunting camp. AgUp.com and Ag Up Equipment. Out of Bounds, 105.9 The Zone, ESPN. We welcome in our friend Tom Luginbill, national college football analyst with ESPN. Lugs joins us on the Bell's Two-Hearted L guest line. Tom, we were talking recruiting earlier and the fact that A&M may have just dropped $20 to $30 million legally on their class through very savvy name, image, likeness deals and are just absolutely rolling. But I wanted to talk to you as someone who has led the way been the head of recruiting for ESPN's college football recruiting. Explain how a young man, because we had some questions, explain how a young man becomes a 5-star as far as ratings.
Well, I'll tell you this. I think that label is overinflated. And the reason why I say it's overinflated is you're going to have far more kids in a class not pan out than you are going to have them actually pan out.
Right.
And I think if you just throw 35 stars on guys or 55 stars on guys, there's nowhere for them to go but down when you look at the percentages of whether or not they're going to pan out. It's actually very, very low. So what we've always tried to do is if we're going to give a guy a 5-star, we have to be as convinced as possible that we've checked as many boxes. And I'm not talking about the talent side of it. I'm talking about the other stuff. That we've eliminated red flags or identified them, that we've checked boxes on competitive toughness, competitive temperament, academics, all of these different things. Because at the end of the day, let's just say it, all of these kids are talented enough to play. They're so advanced now that regardless of where they go, they're not going to be mismatched versus the people that they're joining. The question is, can they handle all of the other stuff that comes with it? And so what we've tried to do is make sure that we always identify those things, try to check as many boxes as possible, because if you're going to give a kid that label, you want them to pan out. And the way I look at it is if there's truly 35 5-stars at the high school level every year, or 50, or whatever website might label them as being, how come there aren't that many impact true freshmen the next year? There's not. There's actually a select few. There are some that play as a freshman as a role player, some that play as a freshman as an every down player, very few that play as a freshman as an impact player. So what we've tried to do is minimize the number of 5-stars, maximize the number of 4-stars, and then apply the grade to go along with the star tier, because that's the one thing that we've tried to do is we apply a numerical grade like you would in a pro personnel model, all right? Because let's just look at a 3-star player, Bo. If our 3-star spectrum is between a 70 and a 79.99, all right? And a 79.99 is the closest grade you could get to being a 4-star player, and you sign with, let's just say, Ole Miss, or you sign with Tennessee, all right? But you're a 3-star. There's a difference between that player and the grade 74 3-star that signs with Miami of Ohio, or signs with Southern Miss, or signs with East Carolina. Those are two entirely different players. They may be in the same spectrum, but you still have to have something to separate them. And that's why we've included the numerical number.
To me, it's most of the programs outside of the elite recruiters, but when we're talking about MSU and Ole Miss, they have to load the boat on as many high 3-stars and hit on them, or low 4s, but high 3s in that kind of space as they can to be as successful as, they can be, right? Year in, year out.
Sure. Yeah, there's no question. I always kind of like to break the class into thirds. You got your top third, your middle third, and your bottom third. All right. You know, on that top third, not all of those guys are going to pan out. What you need to have happen is the bulk of that middle third to not only pan out, but have 3 or 4 of them exceed expectations, so to replace the guys that didn't pan out in the top third. Then in that bottom third, you need to not only have program guys, but you need to have 3 or 4 or 5 of those guys exceed expectations and move themselves up into that middle third, if you can kind of envision that. And so the reality is there's 2,800 players approximately in every class that will sign an FBS letter of intent. The vast majority, not the majority, the vast majority of that number are 3 stars and 2 stars, not 4 stars and 5 stars. So that's really where the work has to be done in player evaluation. And the problem is the lower down you go from 5 to 4 to 3 to 2, all right, the more difficult the projection becomes because there's way more unknown variables. You're having to project more things that you're hoping turn out to be correct, and it's not an exact science. And I think so much of it has to do with your belief system of what your foundation is in player evaluation is. Here's our critical factors. Here's our must-haves. We will not take a kid if he doesn't have A, B, C, D, or E, and you can't deviate from that stuff because if you do, then you're all over the map. You have no true principles in your evaluation platform. You've got to have that foundation that you don't deviate from.
Tom Luginbill on the Out of Bounds show with ESPN. He joins us on the Bell's Two Hearted Ale guest line. Can you give us an example of 2 or 3 guys that y'all didn't rate high enough that ended up becoming superstars just right off the top of your head, maybe in the last, I don't know, 10? I mean, it happens to everybody. I'm just curious.
Oh yeah, I mean, heck, I can name a bunch of them if I wanted to go through. Let me see here. Hold on, give me 2 seconds, and I'll pull up our little database here. I'll give you some guys. All right, let's see right here. Well, here's a couple. If you look at guys that sometimes it's the other way around. Sometimes it's guys that you really, really graded high, and then they don't pan out versus guys that you didn't grade high enough and turn into absolute great players. So like a Dylan Gabriel would be a guy like that, out of Hawaii, lightly recruited, really didn't see much Power 5 attention, goes to Central Florida. Now he's going to end up being obviously the quarterback for the Oklahoma Sooners. I think he's one. George Karlaftis, although we gave him a very, very high 4-star grade. I think if you look at him in college, if we were to re-rank the 2019 class, the defensive end out of Purdue, he'd probably be a top 20 player.
Wow.
He was the 69th player or whatever in the ESPN 300 at that time. There are so many guys that you could go through.
Okay, I got a question.
That fit the bill you're talking about. Sure.
Dylan Gabriel, tell me what he is. Now, most people haven't watched him, okay? So Ole Miss thought they had a beat on him. Then all this crazy stuff happened. Caleb Williams is leaving Oklahoma. Levy's there. He's got the relationship. He was about to enroll at UCLA. Now he's going to Oklahoma. What does Oklahoma have in Dylan Gabriel, Luke's?
I think, to be honest with you, he's an awful lot like a left-handed version of a healthy McKenzie, the kid that was at Central Florida, the transfer to Florida State.
Okay.
Not very big, undersized, really poised, great accuracy, really good with ball placement, knowing how to layer the football and when a ball needs zip, when a ball needs air, when he needs to just get a little bit on it, maybe take a little off of it. Really good deep ball passer. Obviously going to be moving up in terms of level of competition, but that's also going to be a completely revamped roster. I mean, I don't know if you just saw Mario Williams, who was the number 1 ranked receiver in last year's class, decided to enter the transfer portal. Jaden Hazelwood, who was the number 1 receiver 3 years ago, entered the transfer portal, is now going to Arkansas. That's not quite the roster that it looked like at the beginning of the year. So there's going to be some new faces around him. I just think that's Jeff Levy's guy. When that happened and Jeff Levy got to Oklahoma and Caleb Williams, for whatever reason, decided to make the decision that he made, that was a no-brainer. That UCLA thing wasn't happening. And to be honest with you, I think it sends a message. And I like this because Caleb Williams makes the announcement. And he goes, but, I would consider coming back to Oklahoma. I think Brent Venables told him, if you go in the transfer portal, you're gone.
Yep.
Because we're replacing you. And I love that. And here's the thing is, you're Caleb Williams, right? You just came off of a remarkable year. All right. You could become the face of college football at the quarterback position over the next year or two. You have a coach in Brent Venables that just hired Jeff Levy, a quarterback's coach and a coordinator that's highly thought of, really good from a quarterback perspective. It fits the mold of your skill set perfectly, and Caleb Williams walks away. Now, why is that? I'll tell you why I think it is. I think that Caleb Williams wants to win a national championship and knows that he can't do it at Oklahoma.
Gotcha.
Because what's the other reason? Why would you leave if you're him?
Yeah, you wouldn't.
You wouldn't. I mean, so is he sitting there going, okay, man, Georgia's got a pretty nice looking roster. They look like they might need a quarterback. They could compete for a college football playoff berth. And let me look over here. That's got to be his mindset right now, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So with Spencer Rattler, you made a comment in the first week of the season, hey, Matt Corral is a much better quarterback than Spencer Rattler. Then we didn't know this was going to happen. He loses his job a few weeks later. I think he's going to a South Carolina staff that, while Shane's got energy and doing some good things, they're not going to be special on offense and really know how to find the golden cookie. What do you think he is, Tom, as a quarterback, Spencer Rattler?
I think he's extremely talented. I question his leadership skills. I question his ability to play within a structure. He likes to freelance. He likes to just kind of do his thing. It got him in trouble last year. I remember the conversation you're pointing to. It was after week 1. I had Oklahoma Tulane, and I think my quote to you was Matt Corral and Spencer Rattler aren't even in the same league.
Yeah.
At that time.
And you're right.
And I think that the issue this time for him is, for the first time, he's going to be on a team that's not the best team in his conference, not the best team in the division, and is not going to have anywhere near the skilled personnel around him that he had at Oklahoma as a freshman and a sophomore. And so now more of the offense is going to be on his shoulders. More is going to be asked of him. And it's not going to be easier. It's going to get harder. I'm going to be very, very interested to see, because, listen, the job Shane Beamer and that staff did this year was nothing short of sensational. I mean, you're playing with a GA coming off the street at quarterback, then you end up with a third-string quarterback. You got to beat Florida at home with a third-string walk-on. I mean, I don't even know how they pulled all that stuff off, and congrats to them. So is this an upgrade? Yes. But how much quicker and how much better are they going to get around him? Are they going to use the transfer portal? Are they going to play with a bunch of young guys? I don't think anybody knows the answer to that question in South Carolina.
This could be a disaster. Tom Luginbill, national college football analyst with ESPN on the Out of Bounds show. So everybody's looking for a Joe Burrow in the transfer portal, but they're not going to find him. How do we reevaluate quarterbacks in the transfer portal, Lukes?
Well, the problem is there's only one ball. It's becoming increasingly difficult to keep more than 2 quarterbacks on the roster under scholarship, where just a few years back you could keep 3 or 4, and you redshirted probably 2 of the 4, and then they would battle it out when their time would come. And now everybody wants to start, and they want things promised to them, and it doesn't work that way. And so if I'm in the transfer portal, so I'm going to use Zach Calzada as an example here, all right? You're Zach Calzada. You played 10 games. You did not win the job coming out. Haynes King wins the job, plays well in the opener, gets hurt. Then Zach Calzada comes in. Takes a while for him to get going, but he ends up playing pretty good. They beat Alabama, and he now has 10 starts under his belt. Why would he leave? The only reason he would leave is if he went in and talked to Jimbo Fisher and was expecting to be the starting quarterback, and Jimbo Fisher said, no, we're going to have a competition for whoever's going to be the starting quarterback. Well, why? I just started 10 games. Well, we've got Max Johnson coming in. We've got Connor Wigman. All right. Haynes King had beat you out the first time, and I understand that you play well in this and that, but we've got to create competition at the position. I'm willing to bet Zach Calzada didn't want to hear that. Well, does he think it's going to be handed to him somewhere else? because it's not.
No, it's not.
I mean, if he goes somewhere else, because what they're all doing now is they're all looking at the depth chart. Okay, where is there an opening? Where is there an opening? Okay, well, even if there's an opening, you still have to win the job. I mean, that's the fallacy in all of this, is that they all want to go somewhere else because they think it's going to be easier somewhere else. So I would, when you say how would you evaluate the transfer portal when it comes to quarterbacks, first question I'd ask is how many times has this guy battled before he decided to leave?
Mm-hmm.
Right? How many times was this guy in a quarterback competition before he decided to leave? So I look at Casey Thompson from Texas. All right, that guy battled as a freshman with Ellinger. All right, then battled with Hudson Card, ends up winning the job. They play Hudson Card's son too, so both of them start to play. And so he went through a couple of battles. Then all of a sudden the Quinn Ewers thing happened. Probably sees the writing on the wall. He's got enough of a sample size to where he's probably going to be attractive in the transfer portal, and he'll probably find a pretty good landing spot. And he's a pretty good player. You know, will he be an upgrade? We'll see. But I just think that all of these guys that want that just there seems to be this easy path that we've created, and there is no easy path. And that's part of the transfer portal issue, whether it's a quarterback or any other position right now.
Blake, did Emory Jones enter? I guess he did. All right, Tom Lugan.
Yeah, remember he announced that he was going to play in the bowl game and get in the transfer portal after.
Okay. All right. Tom Luginbill with ESPN on the Bell's Two-Hearted Ale guest line. Tom, can you explain to our listeners what Texas A&M just did as far as modern-day recruiting and the class that they just secured, talent-wise?
Well, this is what happens when you have no rules. This is what happens when there's no legislation. This is what happens when you just open the floodgates and tell everybody to fend for themselves. If anybody thought the rich wasn't going to get richer, you must be living with half a brain, because not all programs are created equal. Not all resources are created equal. And all this has done is created an avenue for the teams and the universities with the most resources, both internally and locally, to just outpace everybody else. And here's what's eventually going to happen, in my opinion. We're going to end up with about 40 to 50 schools that are going to be playing major college football, and everybody else is going to be priced out. Unless we start doing something to legislate this, I'm not saying we can put the pace back into the tube, but if there's, and I think I've shared this with you before. Did you know that the NCAA's NIL legislation that they actually have in writing, did you know that it's one page?
Is it really?
Here, I'm pulling it up right now. I have it on a PDF form. Here's what it's called: The Quick Guide to New NCAA Interim Policy of Name, Image, and Likeness. It basically says, if no federal law is in place to support student athletes' use of NIL, then under the NCAA interim NIL policy, schools and student athletes should adhere to the guidance below. Okay, here's the guidance below. NCAA rules prohibiting pay-for-play and impermissible inducements remain in effect. No pay-for-play, no impermissible inducements, but no details on what that actually is, right? Individuals and schools in states with NIL laws or executive actions with the force of law in effect. NCAA rules, including prohibitions on pay-for-play and improper recruiting inducements, remain in effect, but NIL activities protected by state law will not impact eligibility. Well, what the heck does that mean?
Right.
And how many loopholes are involved in that? Individuals where there is no state law or executive action. If an individual chooses to engage in an NIL activity, eligibility will not be impacted by NCAA amateurism and athletes' eligibility bylaws. But other NCAA rules, including prohibitions on pay-for-play and improper recruiting inducements, remain in effect. That's the whole entire sheet. No details, no bylaws, no sublines.
In other words, they're leaving it up to the state legislatures to create their own bill. That's why Texas has the most advantageous bill, even over like Mississippi. We just received some feedback from state legislators, Lugs, that they already rolled out a bill last year. Okay, they realized that it's not as aggressive as Texas and Florida's, so they have to tweak it.
Right.
Okay.
Right. Yeah.
Because you
And by
can't.
the way,
A&M and Texas, others can go and tell a kid about a deal. They can't give them anything allegedly, but tell a kid, here's the way we're going to structure your NIL deal. All right, we're going to give you, $200,000 over 4 years, and do the whole deal, but they don't get it till they get to campus, but they know what they got, and the contract's in place. Tom, not all states are like that.
Sure. No, that's right. And again, if you have the resources to, I think I had shared this with you when the BYU thing came out about their walk-on program. And I said, okay, so you got somebody locally that's going to put every walk-on at BYU on scholarship. So I'm Nick Saban at Alabama. I'm Jimbo Fisher at A&M. I'm Brian Kelly at LSU, wherever it is, Ryan Day at Ohio State. I'm going to go to my hey, guys, we need to create a walk-on grant. And we're now going to go stockpile the players that we'd like to take but didn't have room for, and they're going to be quote-unquote walk-ons. All right, so what's to stop anybody from doing that? Nothing. Why? Because there's been no rules. There's been no forethought to any of this. Defining impermissible benefits without details of policy and without being able to police it, you can't define that. They say, well, you can't use mind is what's going on, left and right. And here's what it's going to lead to. It's going to lead to a bunch of players that don't love football, that are chasing the money, that will never pan out, and the teams are going to fail miserably.
Interesting. All right. The big story going forward now that I've only got a minute here, but the big story one of the big stories in college football is, can Jimbo drive this thing now that he's recruiting gangbusters with his third mega class there or whatever at A&M? Can he? Now we're about to do away with divisions in the SEC. So I think that's actually advantageous for Jimbo, right? The timing could be good. And then the 12-team playoff, which, as you know, we're going to go to. And that could always be good, which means Jimbo doesn't have to be in the top 4. He could be ranked 6th, 8th,
right.
9th. But he's still going to have, quote-unquote, top 3 talent, right? So that could, again, so this is going to be fascinating to see if he did it in a weak conference with the number 1 pick in the NFL draft. And can he bottle it? I like to say, can he out-recruit his coaching, Tom, going forward?
Well, that's a really, really great question. And I've always said, players trump plays, X's and O's, not Jimmy's and Joe's, Jimmy's and Joe's over X's and O's. But that's what's going to have to happen. And keep in mind, to get rid of divisions, if they come up with subdivisions, well, who are they going to be paired with?
That's a great question if they are with Texas, Oklahoma, and one more team.
Right.
I don't know who that would be, but that is Arkansas. A great question, Tom. Yeah. All right, dude. Hey, thanks so much. And I hope you had a great week in Orlando, and we'll talk next week, okay?
All right. Take care, man.
See you, buddy. Tom Luginbill, national college football analyst with ESPN, joining us on the Bell's Two-Hearted Ale guest line. #1 American IPA. Bell's Two-Hearted Ale. Good morning. Welcome in. The Out of Bounds Show is brought to you by the delicious cheeseburger at Bulldog Burger, Lake Harbor and Ridgeland, Starkville, and Tupelo. Bobby Bell.